Good afternoon, boys and girls. It's Mr. Dipaolo. Going to be reading Chapter 3 of the Harry Potter. Regathor did 1, Florio did 2, and I will be doing Chapter 3. So, without further ado, let's start. Chapter 3, Letters. Chapter 3, Letters. Letters from No One. The escape of the Brazilian bow constructor earned Henry his longest ever punishment. By the time he was allowed out of his cupboard again, the summer holidays had started, and Dudley already broken his new video camera, crashed his remote control airplane, and the first time out on his racing bike, knocked down old Miss Figg as she crossed Privet Drive on her crutches. Harry was glad school was over, but there was no escaping Dudley's gang, who visited the house every single day. Piers, Dennis, Malcolm, and Gordon were all big and stupid, but as Dudley was the biggest and stupidest of the lot, he was the leader. The rest of them there were all quite happy to join in Dudley's favorite sport, Harry hunting. This was the why Harry spent as much time as possible out of the house, wandering around and thinking about the end of the holidays, where he could see a tiny ray of hope. When September came, he would be going off to secondary school. And for the first time in his life, he wouldn't be with Dudley. Dudley had been accepted at Uncle Vernon's old private school. Smithering Piers, Poleskis, was going there too. Harry, on the other hand, was going to Stonewall High, the local public school. Dudley thought this was very funny. They stuffed people's heads down the toilet the first day at Stonewall, he told Harry. Want to come upstairs and practice? No thanks, said Harry. The poor toilets never had anything as horrible as your head down it, and it might be sick. And he ran before Dudley came out. Could work out what he said. One day in July, Aunt Poonie took Dudley to London to buy his Smilling uniform, leaving Harry at Miss Figg's. Miss Figg's wasn't as bad as usual. It turned out she'd broken her leg tripping over one of her cats, and she didn't seem quite as fond of them as before. Watch television. She let Harry watch television and gave him a bit of chocolate cake that tasted as though as she had it for several years. That evening, Dudley paraded around the living room for the family in his brand new uniform. Smelling boys wore maroon tailcoats, orange knickerbockers, and the flat straw hats called boaters. They also carried knobby sticks, used for hitting each other. While the teachers weren't looking, this was supposed to be a good training for later life. As he looked at Dudley in the new knickerbockers, Uncle Vernon said gratefully that this was the proudest moment of his life. Aunt Petunia burst into tears, said she couldn't believe it was her Ickle Dickelson. He looked so handsome and grown up. Harry didn't trust himself to speak. He thought two of his ribs might already have cracked from trying not to laugh. There was a horrible smell in the kitchen the next morning when Harry went for breakfast. It seemed to be coming from a large meat tub in the sink. He went to have a look. The tub was full of what looked like dirty rags swimming in gray water. What's this? He asked Aunt Petunia. Her lips tightened as they always did if he dared to ask a question. Your new school uniform, she said. Harry looked in the bowl again. Oh, he said, I didn't realize it had to be so wet. Don't be stupid, snapped Aunt Petunia. I'm dyeing some of Dudley's old things gray for you. It'll look just like everyone else's when I'm finished. Harry seriously doubted this, but thought it best not to argue. He sat down at the table, tried not to think about how he was going to look on his first day at Stonewall High, like he was wearing bits of old elephant skin probably. Dudley and Uncle Vernon came in, both with wrinkled noses because of the smell from Harry's new uniform. Uncle Vernon opened his newspaper, as usual, and Dudley banged his smelling stick, which he carried everywhere on the table. They heard the click on the mail slot from the flop of the letters on the document. "Get the mail, Dudley," said Uncle Vernon from behind his paper. "Make Harry get it." "Get the mail, Harry." "Make Dudley get it." "Poke him with your stick, Dudley." Harry dodged the Micklin stick and went to get the mail. Three things lay on the doormat: a postcard for Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, who was vacationing in the Islands of Wight, a brown envelope that looked like a bill, and a letter for Harry. Harry picked up and stared at it, his heart tumbling like a giant galactic spank. No one ever in his whole life had written to him. Who would? He had no friends, no other relatives. He didn't belong to the library, so he never got rude notice asking for books back. Yet here it was, a letter addressed so plainly that could be no mistake. Mr. H. Potter, the cupboard under the stairs, 4 Privet Drive, Little Wing, Surrey. The envelope was thick and heavy, made of yellowish parchment, and the address was written in emerald green ink. There was no stamp. Turning the envelope over, he heard trembling. Harry saw a purple wax seal, bearing a coat of arms, a lion of eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding his large H. "Hurry up, boy," shouted Uncle Vernon from the kitchen. "What are you doing checking for letter bombs?" He chuckled at his own jokes. Harry went to the back kitchen, still staring at his letter. He handed Uncle Vernon the bill and the postcard, sat down, and slowly began to open the yellow envelope. Uncle Vernon ripped open the bill, snorted in disgust, and flipped over the postcard. "Marge is ill," he informed Aunt Petunia. "Ain't he funny? Well, Dad," said Dudley smiling. "Dad, Harry's got something." Harry was on the point of unfolding his letter, which was written on the same heavy parchment as the envelope, when it was jerked sharply out of his hand by Uncle Vernon. "That's mine," said Harry, trying to snatch it back. "Who'd be writing you?" sneered Uncle Vernon, shaking the letter open with one hand and glancing it at it. His face went from red to green faster instead of traffic lights. And it didn't stop there. Within seconds, it was grayish white of old porch. "Petunia," he gasped. Dudley tried to grab the letter to read it, but Uncle Vernon held it high out of his reach. Aunt Petunia took it curiosity and read the first line. For a moment, it looked as though she might faint. She clutched her throat, made a choking noise. "Vernon! Oh my goodness! Vernon!" They stared at each other, seeming to have forgotten it. Harry and Dudley were still in the room. Dudley wasn't used to being ignored. He gave his father a sharp tap on his head with his stick. "I want to read the letter," he said loudly. "I want to read it," said Harry, "as it's mine." "Get out, both of you," croaked Uncle Vernon, stuffing the letter back inside the envelope. Harry didn't move. "I want my letter," he shouted. "Let me see it," demanded Dudley. "Out!" roared Uncle Vernon, and he took both Harry and Dudley by their scarfs of their necks and threw them into the hall, slamming the kitchen door behind them. Harry and Dudley promptly had a furious but silent fight over who would listen to at the keyhole. Dudley won, so Harry has glasses dangling from one ear, lay flat on his stomach to listen in the crack between the door and the floor. "Vernon," Aunt Petunia was saying in a quivering voice, "look at the address. How could they possibly know where he sleeps? You don't think they're watching the house?" "Watching? Spying? Might be following us," muttered Uncle Vernon wildly. "But what should we do, Vernon? Should we write back? Tell them we don't want?" Harry could see Uncle Vernon's shiny black shoes pacing up and down the kitchen. "No," he said finally. "No, we'll ignore it. If they don't get an answer, yes, that's best. We won't do anything. But I'm not having one one in the house, Petuna. Didn't we swear when we took him up we'd stamp out the dangerous nonsense? That evening, when he got back from work, Uncle Vernon did something he'd never done before. He visited Harry up in his cupboard. "Where's my letter?" said Harry, the moment Uncle Vernon had squeezed through the door. "Who's writing to me?" "No one. It was addressed to you by mistake," said Uncle Vernon shortly. "I have burned it." "It was not a mistake," said Harry angrily. "It had my cupboard on it." "Silence!" yelled Uncle Vernon, and a couple of spiders flew from the ceiling. He took a few deep breaths and forced his face into a smile, which looked quite painfully. Yes, Harry, about this cupboard. Your aunt and I have been thinking. You're really getting a bit big for it. We think it might be nice if you moved into Dudley's second bedroom." "Why?" said Harry. "Don't ask questions," snapped his uncle. Take the stuff upstairs now." The Dudley's house had 4 bedrooms, one for Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia, one for visitors, usually Uncle Vernon's sister Marge, one for Dudley slept, and one where Dudley kept all the toys, things, and wouldn't fit into his bedroom. It only took Harry one trip upstairs to move everything he owned from the cupboard to the room. He sat down to the bed and stared around him. Nearly everything here was broken. The month-old camera was lying on top of this small working tank. Dudley had once driven over the next door, once driven over the next door neighbor's dog. In the corner was Dudley's first ever television set, which he'd put his foot through when his favorite program had been canceled. There was a large birdcage, which had once held a parrot that Dudley had swapped at school for a real air rifle, which was up on a shelf at the end, all bent because Dudley had sat on it. Other shelves were full of books. There were only things in the room that looked as though they'd never been touched. From downstairs came the sound of Dudley bawling out his room. "I don't want him in there. I need that room. Make him get out." Harry sighed and stretched out of the bed. Yesterday he'd given anything to be up here. Today he'd rather be back in his cupboard with the letter than up here without it. Next morning at breakfast, everyone was rather quiet. Dudley was in shock. He screamed, whacked his father with the smelling stick, been sick on purpose, kicked his mother, and thrown her torches through the greenhouse roof, and still didn't have his room back. Harry was thinking about this time yesterday, bitterly wishing he'd opened a letter in the hall. Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia kept looking at each other darkly. When the mail arrived, Uncle Vernon, who seemed to be trying to be nice to Harry, made Dudley go and get it. They heard him banging things with the smithering stick all the way down the hall. Then he shouted, "There's another one, Mr. H. Potter, the smallest bedroom, 4 Privet Drive." With a strangled cry, Uncle Vernon leaped from his seat, ran down the hall, Harry right behind him. Uncle Vernon had to wrestle Dudley to the ground to get the letter from him, which was made difficult by the fact that Harry had grabbed Uncle Vernon around his neck from behind. After a minute of confused fighting in which everyone got hit a lot by the stick, Uncle Vernon straightened up, gasping for breath, with Harry's letter clutched in his hand. "Go to your cupboard. I mean, your bedroom," he wheezed at Harry. "Dudley, go. Just go." Harry walked around and around in his room. Somehow, someone knew he had moved out of his cupboard, and they seemed to know he hadn't received his first letter. Surely that meant they'd try again, and this time he'd make sure they didn't fail. He had a plan. The repaired alarm clock rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. Harry turned it off quickly and dressed silently. He mustn't wake the doorsters. He stole downstairs without turning on any of the lights. He was going to wait for the postman on the corner of Privet Drive to get the letters for number 4 first. His heart hammered as he crept across the dark hall towards the front door. Harr! Harry leaped into the air. He trod in on something big and squashy on the doormat. Something alive? Lights clicked on upstairs. To his horror, Harry realized that the big squashy something had been Uncle's face. Uncle Vernon had been lying at the foot of the front door in a sleeping bag, clearly making sure Harry didn't do exactly what he'd been trying to do. He shouted at Harry for about half an hour and then told him to go make a cup of tea. Harry shuffled miserably off into the kitchen. By the time he got back, the mail had arrived. Right into Uncle Vernon's lap, Harry could see 3 letters addressed in green ink. I want, he began, but Uncle Vernon was tearing the letters into pieces before his eyes. Uncle Vernon didn't go to work that day. He stayed at home and nailed up the mail slot. See, he explained to Aunt Petunia through a mouthful of nails, if they ain't deliver, then they just give up. I'm just not sure that'll work, Vernon. Oh, these people's minds work in strange ways. Petunia, they're not like you and me, said Uncle Vernon, trying to knock in a nail a piece of the fruitcake Aunt Petunia had just brought him. On Friday, no less than 12 letters arrived for Harry, as they couldn't go through the mail slot that had been pushed under the door slot through the sides of each, and a few even forced through the small window of the downstairs bathroom. Uncle Vernon stayed at home again. After burning all the letters, he got a hammer and nails and balled up the cracks around the front and back door so no one could go out. He hummed, tiptoe through the tulips, as he worked and jumped at small noises. On Saturday, things began to get out of hand. 24 letters to Harry found their way into the house, rolled up and hidden inside each of the 24 eggs that were very confused. Milkman had handed Aunt Petunia through the living room window. When Uncle Vernon made furious telephone calls at the post office, the dairy, trying to find someone to complain to Aunt Petunia, shredded the letters in her food processor. Who on earth wants to talk to you this badly? Dudley asked Harry in amazement. On Sunday morning, Uncle Vernon sat down at the breakfast table, looking tired and rather ill, but happy. No post on Sundays, he reminded them cheerfully as he spread marmalade on his newspapers. No damn letters today. Something came whistling down the kitchen chimney as he spoke and caught him sharply on the back of his head. Next moment, 30 or 40 later came peeling out of the fireplace like bullets. The Dudleys ducked, but Harry leaped into the air trying to catch one. Out! Out! Uncle Vernon seized Harry around the waist and threw him into the hall. When Aunt Petunia and Dudley had ran out with their arms over their faces, Uncle Vernon slammed the door shut. They could hear the letters still streaming into the room, bouncing off walls and floor. That does it, said Uncle Bert, trying to speak calmly and putting great tufts out of his mustache at the same time. I want you all back here in 5 minutes, ready to leave. We're going away. Just pack some clothes. No arguments. You look so dangerous with half his mustache missing that no one dared argue. 10 minutes later, they had wrenched their way through the boarded up doors, where in the car speeding towards the highway, Dudley was sniffing in the back seat. His father hit him in the head for holding them up while he tried to pack his television, VCR, and computer in his sports bag. They drove and they drove. Even Aunt Petunia didn't dare ask where they were going. Every now and then, Uncle Vernon would take a sharp turn and drive in the opposite direction for a while. Shake him off! Shake him off! He would mutter whenever he did this. Then they didn't stop to eat or drink all day. By nightfall, Dudley was hauling. He never had such a bad day in his life. He was hungry. He'd missed 5 television shows he'd wanted to see, and he never got so long without blowing up an alien on his computer. Uncle Vernon stopped at last outside a gloomy-looking hotel on the outskirts of the big city. Dudley and Harry shared a room with twin beds and damp, musky sheets. Dudley snored, but Harry stayed awake, sitting at the window still, staring down the lights of passing cars and wondering. They ate stale cornflakes and cold tinned tomatoes on toast for breakfast the next day. They had just finished when the owner of the hotel came over to their table. Excuse me, but this one's for Mr. H. Potter. Only I got about 100 of these at the front desk. She held up a letter so they could read the green ink address. Mr. H. Potter, room 17, Railview Hotel, Cokeworth. Harry made a grab for the letter, but Uncle Vernie knocked his hand out of the way. The woman stated, I will take them, said Uncle Vernie, standing up quickly and following her from the dining room. Wouldn't it be better just to go home, dear? Aunt Petunia suggested timidly hours later, but Uncle Vern didn't seem to hear her exactly what he was looking for. None of them knew. He drove them to the middle of the forest, got out, looked around, shook his head, got back in the car. Off they went again. The same thing happened in the middle of the plowed field, halfway across the suspension bridge in the top of the multi-level parking garage. Daddy's gone mad, hasn't he? Dudley asked. At Petunia dully late that afternoon, Uncle Vernon had parked at the coast, locked them all inside the car, and disappeared. It started to rain. Great drops beat up the roof of the car. Dudley sniffed. It's Monday, he told his mother. The great Humbruto's on tonight. I want to stay somewhere with a television. Monday. This reminded Harry of something. It was Monday. You could usually count on Dudley to know the days of the week because of television. But tomorrow, Tuesday, was Harry's 11th birthday. Of course, his birthday was never exactly fun. Last year, the Dullys had given him a coat hanger and a pair of Uncle Vern's old socks. Still, you weren't 11 every day. Uncle Vernon was back, and he was smiling. He was also carrying a long tin package. Didn't answer Aunt Petunia when she asked what he bought. Found the perfect place. He said, come on, everyone out. It was very cold outside the car. Uncle Vernon was pointing at what it looked like a large rock way out at sea. Perched on top of the rock was the most miserable little shack you could imagine. One thing was certain, there was no television in there. Storm forecast for tonight, said Uncle Vernon, gleefully clapping his hands together, and this gentleman's kindly agreed to let us use his boat. A toothless old man came along, about up to them, pointing with rather wicked grin at an old rowboat bombing the iron gray water blew them. I've already gave us some rations, said Uncle Vernon, so all aboard. It was freezing the boat. Icy sea spray and rain crept down their necks, and a chilly wind whipped their faces. After what seemed like hours, they reached a rock, where Uncle Vernon, slipping and sliding, led the way to the broken-down house. Inside was horrible. It smelled strongly of seaweed. The wind whistled through the gas of the wooden walls, and the fireplace was damp and empty. There was only 2 rooms. Uncle Vernon's rations turned out to be a bag of chips each and 4 bananas. He tried to start a fire, but the empty chip bag was just smoke and shivered up. Could do some of those letters now, eh? He said cheerfully. He was in a very good mood. Obviously, he thought nobody stood a chance of reaching them here in a storm to deliver mail. Harry probably agreed, though that thought didn't cheer him up at all. A night fell. The promised storm blew up around them. Spray from the high waves splattered the walls of the hut, and a fierce wind rattled the 50 windows. Aunt Petunia found a few moldly blankets in the second room and made up a bed for Dudley on the moth-eaten sofa. She and Uncle Vernon went off to a lumpy bed next door, and Harry was left to find the softest bit of floor he could and curl up under the thinnest, most ragged blanket. Storm raged more and more furiously as the night went on. Harry couldn't sleep. He shivered and turned over, trying to get comfortable, his stomach rumbling with hunger. Dudley's snores were drowned by the low rolls of thunder that started near midnight. The lightened dial of Dudley's watch, with dangling over the edge of the sofa on his fat wrist, told Harry he'd be 11 in 10 minutes' time. He lay and watched his birthday tick near, wondering if the Dudleys would remember at all, wondering where the letter writer was now. 5 minutes to go. Harry heard something creak outside. He hoped the roof wasn't going to fall in, although he might be warmer if it did. 4 minutes to go. Maybe the house and private drove would be so full of letters they would go back that he'd be able to steal one somehow. 3 minutes to go. Was the sea slapping hard at the rock like that? And 2 minutes to go. Was the funny crunching noises? Was the rock crumbling into the sea? 1 minute to go, and he'd be 11. 30 seconds. 20. 10. 9. Maybe to wake Dudley up just to annoy him. 3, 2, 1. Boom! The whole shack shivered, and Harry sat bolt right up, staring at the door. Someone was outside, knocking to come in. So that is the end of chapter 3. Hope you enjoy story time, and I hope you look forward to chapter 4 being read tomorrow. Wonder who our guest reader will be?